Hello, I'm back. Did you miss me? Sorry about last week. I think I was ill. I'm not sure what it was, really. I just had a major loss of motivation to do anything, a complete loss of the ability to focus. So I took a few days off, and, well, obviously Friday, Titanfall came around, so I've been playing that pretty much ever since. But don't worry, just a minor break before I embark on a major Titanfall series, just to get my head in the right space. And you know, I do have to take some time off. I'm a human being, I've got rights. So yeah, I'm heading back on track, but everything's kind of up in the air at the minute. I've still got the Easter egg video to put out, because I think I underestimated how difficult it is to record a bunch of Easter eggs. Some of them are quite difficult to reproduce. I should really focus on making videos that don't span like 50 to 100 different games, just to make my life a bit easier. But I suppose that's where the Titanfall series comes in. Nice and easy to record that, all you have to do is run around with a single gun for a while. So anyway, let's talk about Titanfall. You're watching my very first game at the minute, so don't expect anything wonderful in terms of gameplay quality. This is me playing naive. Now that I've put a few hours into it, I should be a bit better, my gameplay should be a bit more exciting, and I'm going to start recording very soon for a Titanfall series, of course. As far as that series is concerned, I'm in no major rush. I'm going to take my time, you know, ensure quality over quantity. There's not that many weapons in Titanfall, which means, you know, I'm not under too much pressure to get them all covered or anything. So I'm going to take my time, I'm going to get the videos right. And hopefully my content will be entertaining to watch even for those who don't play or don't want to play Titanfall. So I'm going to take it easy and preserve my sanity, because I'm quite content to play this game all summer. I may yet do some variety content in the midst of Titanfall, as not to sort of focus too heavily on a single game. Because of course at this moment I'm not entirely sure how much interest there is in Titanfall and how much staying power it'll have. So it's always best to stay flexible and keep my options open. But YouTube folk do love a good old weapon guide, so I'll stick to what I do best for a little while at least. And then at some point, after I've kind of done the meat of Titanfall, you can expect a 6-part series of iconic arms. But here I am, nattering away about future plans, when I could be answering some questions. Captain Krill says, Stu, when listening to older videos of you, I noticed a distinct change in the way that you talk in your videos. In older videos, your tone is softer and gentler, while in more recent videos, your voice is noticeably stronger and more emphatic. Old Stu sounds very soothing and comforting. New Stu is much more businesslike. Is this something you've noticed as well? And what might be the driving force behind the change? Well, I suppose the key difference is confidence. I mean, back when I started doing the bonus videos, I wasn't particularly confident in doing unscripted content. And as you practice, you get better at it, I suppose. I realise better is subjective, and you may prefer old Stu, which is fine. But the slightly louder, slightly more bold Stu and more recent bonuses, I guess is an attempt by me to be more entertaining, to be more sort of, well, I don't know, more radical, more in your face, more fun. I don't know, I guess it's kind of a persona you sort of adopt as you do these things. It's not really a conscious change, it's kind of a natural thing that's come about. I can try and dial it back a bit if you'd like. I think I sound a bit more sedate today, but that's probably just because I'm really tired. It's 12:30 in the afternoon and I've been up since about 8 PM yesterday, so I'm coming to the end of my day. Mr. Rightsab says, does your finger get tired scrolling all the way to the bottom of the comments to find your questions? Simple answer, no, because I don't use the scroll wheel. I'll press the end key, and that takes me to the bottom. That's a pro tip for you right there. Oddfellow says, Stu, my viewer request was a history of LucasArts games, and he got a lot of downvotes. So my question to you is, did you enjoy the LucasArts games like Grim Fandango, Monkey Island series and such? And also, is your cats named after the characters Bill and Ted from the movies Bill and Ted? And if so, do they actually have excellent adventures? I am a big fan of the LucasArts and Lucasfilm games, yes, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of the Monkey Island series, and I think, well, I don't think they've ever made a bad point-and-click game. So as far as a history of LucasArts, I guess I'd be more likely to do it as a brief history of point-and-click adventure games, because, you know, that lets me cover other games in a similar vein. But I'm reasonably familiar with the genre, so that's definitely a possibility. Of course, I can't say exactly when. I do have a few other ideas for a brief history of. I've got the piracy-themed one that I mentioned. I'd also quite like to do driving games as well, because, well, I'm quite the fan of driving games. I have quite a surprising tolerance for even the most mediocre of driving games, so I've got quite a few in my collection. But yeah, I'd love to do something about Monkey Island in the future, definitely. Onage King 828 says, hello. Are you big on sriracha? It occurs to me that I don't really know how to pronounce sriracha, so I hope I'm not completely off base with that one. As far as the sauce is concerned, it's okay, but it's not my favourite hot sauce. I'm not really too fussy. I like Cholula. I'm also quite a big fan of Blair's stuff. Blair's Death Sauce comes to mind. Sriracha's probably a little bit too sweet for my tastes. I prefer a bit more of a vinegar tang. So there you go. I don't think I've got any hot sauce in at the minute though. I just tend to use chili powder if I want to add a bit of spice. El Carcane says, "Greetings, Stu. If you ever finish Crush, would you do some kind of the evolution of Crush video? Something where we could see multiple builds of the game and you talk about the developing process, inspirations, problems, cancelled ideas, and so on." It's certainly a possibility. I'll probably show you Crush again at some point in the future when I've done a bit more development work on it. I spent a couple of days last week on it, which is where some of my time has gone. I made some refinements, made some additions to the HUD. I changed the behaviour of the bulldozer so you can no longer hide in its turning circle. I added some really cool trails to the brake lights, like out of Akira. So when you sort of steer hard right, the brakes come on and it makes these wonderful red trails on the arena, which slowly fade away. It's beautiful. I should really add more of a game, you know, instead of focusing on these details, but it's coming along, And I do like developing it, so I probably will, inch by inch, whenever I get a spare moment, I will spend some time on it. I'll show you the progress in a few bonuses time. I'll give you an update on its status every couple of months. Rosie says, "Speaking of game difficulties, what difficulty do you usually steer towards when you play a new game? Are you hardcore and go for the highest difficulty, or do you just go with the flow on normal mode?" My first playthrough, I'll probably start on normal. I don't like dying a lot, I don't like being frustrated with the game, so I prefer to just, regular difficulty is fine for me. In fact, I'll admit, if a game becomes frustrating at any point and I'm not really playing it for the challenge, I'm just playing it for the story, I will, without shame, drop it down to easy. I don't care. If it's a game that I'm playing for the story and I can't be bothered with a frustrating section, yeah, stick it on easy, I don't care. Most of the time though, yeah, I'll play a game on normal. And, well, that's usually it. It's rare that I'll replay a game twice. My backlog is far too full to be double dipping on games. Zach Welsh says, "Hey Stu, fellow Manc here. What part of Manchester are you originally from?" Well, I'm not originally from Manchester, I just live here. I came here to get a job and then, well, ever since then I've settled down. I'm originally from Preston, which is some 30-40 miles north. So not a million miles away, but I wouldn't describe myself as Mancunian, really. Well, aside from the fact that I've lived here for about 10 years. Sebastian Rousey says, "Your voice, it's different. Sick? Tired? Who knows, maybe I was coming down with something then. Maybe that's why I felt awful last week. If I sound off today though, it is because I'm tired." Arafak says, "Stu, I didn't see any question on this, but what do you think of the new South Park game? The Stick of Truth looks like awfully good fun. However, it is quite short, and it is £40. So, given that I'm kind of busy at the minute, I'm holding off. I'm going to wait until there's a bit of a price drop. So at some point in the future, when I've got some spare time, and the game costs maybe £20 or so, I'll pick it up then, and then I'll give it a playthrough. In the meantime, I've got Titanfall to occupy me." Verdasco says, "Hey Stu, is your 360 collecting dust?" No, far from it in fact. I use it quite a lot to record games. There's quite a few 360 games that crop up in this Easter egg video, because I do have quite a large collection of 360 games, so I've got a good library to draw from. Mr. Flying Llama says, "Psst, Stu, is an April Fool's video on the venue in the near future?" I suppose it'll have to be, won't it, because it's almost April the 1st. I don't even know what I'm going to do. I've got a Titanfall series to start. I don't need this. So I don't know, I guess I've got to do something. But it'll probably be something that I can do relatively quickly, nothing too ambitious. So I'm going to have a think about it and then try and decide on something which I can turn out within a couple of days. Just, a fun little video. Best not to overthink it, I suppose. Roger Toledo asks, "Where did you first meet your girlfriend?" We actually went to the same high school, although we didn't start dating until just after university. So it must be, 18, 19, almost 20 years ago that we first met. Although we've only been together for, I think, 9 years now? Something like that? LZ Mike says, "Now that we've seen Crush, it reminded me that you mentioned a preference to low-level programming like OpenGL. As a computer science major, I feel obliged to ask, how low-level? Have you ever delved into machine programming, or do you draw the line at some degree of human readability?" I've dabbled with machine code. I have a moderate understanding of 68K assembly, although I have little practical application of such knowledge. I mean, in a pure sense, dealing with OpenGL isn't exactly low level. Low level would be hitting the hardware directly. These days, I think that sort of thing is impractical. I do think, your basic APIs like OpenGL and Direct3D, they do serve a very useful purpose, particularly if you want your code to run on more than one machine. So when I say I prefer low-level stuff, what I really mean is I don't really want to use GameMaker or Unity. When it comes to games programming, I do quite like to reinvent the wheel. I mean, arguably it's a waste of time, but I'm not a commercial game developer, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just a hobbyist. I can do what I like. Me Too Lethal says, "Hey Stu, have you ever pirated any game/movie/song?" Yeah, of course. I think you would genuinely struggle to find somebody who could legitimately say that they had never pirated anything. Whether it's a song taped off the radio, or a movie recorded off television onto a VHS cassette, or a dodgy 3.5-inch floppy disk you bought at a car boot sale. I've been using pirated media for a long time. Of course, the internet didn't really change much, it just made it a lot easier. So back when Napster was a thing, you can bet I downloaded some Metallica songs. I don't even like Metallica. I just, thought, ooh, I better download some songs from them. Actually, I take that back. I do quite like Metallica. I'm just not like a huge fan, As far as video game piracy is concerned, more recently, I did go through a bit of a phase whilst I was a student. Basically, I had no money and I had access to the internet. So of course, pirating games was a tempting thing. I did buy video games, but I had a limited amount of money, so I'd only buy the games that I knew I'd really like. So I've bought all of the Civilization games. I bought the first Halo for PC. I bought Call of Duty for PC. But there were some games which I pirated. I think I pirated the Need for Speed Underground games for PC. Just to give you an idea of the kind of era we're talking. These days I do tend to buy most of my video games, but then I suppose I kind of have a job. But even so, I do sometimes download, shall we say, dodgy copies, and a lot of the emulation I do is on shaky ground as well. So of course I pirate stuff, it's something, it's always an option, isn't it? But I do also buy quite a lot of stuff. In fact, I probably buy more video games than most. I'm not trying to pretend that buying a few video games justifies pirating another. It doesn't, clearly. I mean, piracy is always a morally suspect thing to do, but it's an option for when you need a game and you're not prepared to pay for it. As far as music's concerned, stuff like Spotify and YouTube as well, I suppose, that's nipped piracy in the bud. I used to download a lot of MP3s, not so much anymore. The Greatest Corgi says, "Hola Stuart, I was curious about how you felt on social commentary in video game. Does it help or hinder your experience of a game?" Well, as with so much in life, it depends on the execution really, doesn't it? I've got no major objection to a game attempting to explore an aspect of society or attempting to make a comment on an aspect of society. I think it can be an interesting area to explore. But of course, if you are going to make a game that explores such topics, it has to be a good game for it to be considered a good game. For instance, a bad game that explores edgy social issues is just a bad game that explores edgy social issues. It certainly doesn't redeem a bad game by any means. So, examples, games with social commentary. Papers, Please comes to mind. That was an interesting one. It was kind of an exploration of the odds of humanity against being an efficient working machine and processing people's applications. At its core, it was a fun pattern-matching puzzle game. And while the human element was kind of laid on thick, I do think it was done quite well. It's probably one of the more harrowing video games I've played. Despite its simple graphics and basic premise, it really kind of makes you feel bad. So, Papers, Please gets a thumbs up. Another example, Gone Home explores some aspects of burgeoning female sexuality. I actually quite enjoyed this game, but I don't think it's maybe fully worth the praise it's had loaded upon it. I really enjoy games in which you can explore a space, and Gone Home did this relatively well. Like I say, it's a rummage 'em up. You could look through someone's house and discover a story that way, and I quite like that aspect. The father's story, that struck a chord with me, I like that. But the sort of the main focus is on the daughter's story. And it was okay, it's fine, a little bit sort of schlocky, a little bit sort of trashy romance novel. I think the key issue people have with Gone Home is that it was critically acclaimed, despite the fact that it's moderately expensive, quite short, and, well, let's be honest, it's lacking in the gameplay department. All it's got is this kind of moderately interesting story behind it. Other notable games that have social commentary, there's a game called Dysphoria with a 4 in place of 4, which is about someone coming to terms with their transsexuality, which is a touchy subject for some people. It was really nothing more than a set of flash minigames over a game that lasted maybe 10 minutes. Now, I thought it was quite interesting. It certainly, gave me a different perspective on the world, if nothing else. But I certainly wouldn't pay any money for it, but then I didn't have to, because it was free. I guess the interactive arts are a reasonably good way to sort of do stuff like this. Because, I mean, it is a format that it supports experimentation, and it's something that's reasonably accessible. Anybody can produce a Flash game, pretty much anybody. It's not that hard. And it's always challenging and usually interesting to see somebody else's worldview, so I appreciate some of this stuff. It's just, as far as games that I would choose to play are concerned, maybe the hardcore social commentary stuff doesn't quite fit that bill. Anyway, I welcome a bit of diversity in gaming. I do quite like it when people experiment with the interactive medium. Just so long as people don't forget that games are supposed to be about the gameplay and the mechanics and the actual feel of how things control, rather than the message that they're trying to convey. I do think the message should be secondary in an interactive piece of entertainment. If you want to have your message as a primary thing, then maybe something non-interactive would be better to focus on, like a book or a movie. But, hey, it's a free country, and if people want to experiment with interactive media, then more power to them. Matthias Mafia says, do you put milk or cereal in your bowl first? Now, I don't eat much cereal. I will have the odd bowl of muesli. I do quite like a spot of muesli. But what sort of monster would put milk in first? You're just going to have dry muesli on top. Oh, it's wrong, I tell you, it's wrong. Muesli goes in first, and then you liberally cover it with milk. That's how it works. That's how it worked for my father. That's how it worked for my father's father. And my children will enjoy milk last as well. Richie Camacho says, hey guys, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Stu passed away a few days ago. I'm his personal friend, and I know he would have wanted me to tell you on this channel and not his main channel. I'm sorry, guys. Richie Camacho, you're a charlatan and a fraud. I'm very much alive and well. Maybe not 100% well. I do still feel a little bit under the weather. I'm sure I'll pull through, though. Zombie Wolf says, Stu, do you think games are not performing well, 60 frames a second, 1080p, because game developers are focusing too much on how the game looks rather than how it performs? I think so. I really see no reason why these games can't meet the standard. Heck, even games last gen were able to get 60 frames per second, and they look just fine. I don't know how game developing works, so I could be wrong, but considering how much more power these consoles are, I would think that they would have no issues at all. I mean, it is true, you can always dial down the texture resolution, the number of polygons, until you hit your target frame rate. But it seems, I don't know, I feel as though a lot of launch titles are rushed. The developers haven't had the time to become fully accustomed with what the hardware can do, and it's the same with all launch titles. They are generally poorly optimized. If you look at the Xbox 360, most of the Xbox 360's launch titles were basically PS2 games with slightly higher resolution. So while it is pretty disappointing that the first wave of Xbox One and PS4 games aren't necessarily hitting 1080p 60 frames a second, hopefully things will smooth out a little bit as time goes on. Of course, consoles are never going to be able to compare with PCs as far as graphics power is concerned. They're not really designed for it, to be perfectly honest. Consoles are designed for most of their life to cost a couple of $100, to be a neat little plastic pre-made box that fits under your television and plays games adequately. And of course the trouble is, games these days are marketed on screenshots and well, YouTube videos, and YouTube's capped at 30 frames a second. So why would you waste double the amount of resources to render at 60 frames per second when all of your advertising isn't going to portray that? That's the trouble, of course, you see, because going from 30 frames a second to 60 frames a second takes twice as much graphical grunt. And when it doesn't show in your advertising or your trailer, then it's difficult to sell on that. So you have to make a game look half as impressive to run at twice the frame rate. And that's why I fear 30 frames a second, well, it might yet return, certainly for your cinematic games. Personally, I take simpler graphics for a higher frame rate every single time. But, you know, the current state of AAA games, it's all about this cinematic experience and the fancy graphics. When will people learn? It's all about the game, doesn't matter about the graphics. Yeah, whatever, Grandad. Alright, we've hit 20 minutes. So I'm going to call it a night and get some sleep. I am absolutely knackered. So, thank you very much for watching. I shall see you on the main channel on Friday, when the Easter egg video will be going live. And the Friday after that, hopefully the Titanfall videos will start. But we'll see. I've also got an April Fool's video to do for the Tuesday after that. So let's see if I can fit it in. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.